Dennis Holbrook believed losing his job was the ultimate misfortune, but life had a far more painful surprise in store for him. Vernon Cray, his boss, publicly fired him in front of 40 colleagues, delivering the shocking news of an affair with Dennis's wife, plunging him into deep despair. Yet, just 12 hours later, a mysterious call from a stranger opened his eyes, revealing he wasn't a victim, but rather a lucky man who had escaped something far worse. Before that fateful Tuesday in March, Dennis's life seemed quite prosperous. At 43, he held the position of regional sales manager at Midwest Paper Solutions. He had been married to Nadine for 15 years and was the proud father of Hazel, a talented sophomore at Ohio State University. Dennis drove a reliable car, lived in a comfortable suburban home in Columbus, and had climbed the corporate ladder from a junior sales representative to a key account manager for the company's largest clients. His life, perhaps not extraordinary, was stable and predictable. Vernon Cray, in stark contrast, was Dennis's complete opposite. At 51, he boasted a villainous silver mane and favored expensive suits, even on casual Fridays, never missing an opportunity to flaunt his status. In his 6 years as vice president of the department, he effortlessly crushed careers as if swatting away bothersome flies. His signature move was tapping a golden pen on the table, a harbinger of trouble for some employee. That sound still sent shivers down Dennis's spine. 3 years prior, promoting Dennis to regional manager, Vernon had acknowledged his potential, warning him not to disappoint. Dennis then believed he had impressed his boss. He worked 60 hours a week, secured a lucrative $2 million contract with the Henderson Group, and reorganized the sales structure, boosting efficiency by 30. Dennis's mother, Ruth, residing at Shady Oaks retirement home, always claimed Vernon had snake eyes and looked at Dennis as if measuring him for a coffin. However, Dennis dismissed her words, believing mothers were prone to excessive worry. Nadine had seemed to be Dennis's steadfast support. They met at a mutual friend's barbecue at 28 and married 2 years later in a modest ceremony at Nadine's parents' church. She worked as a dental hygienist downtown, sharing stories of difficult patients and office gossip at home. They cooked dinner together, watched true crime documentaries on Netflix, and planned vacations they often couldn't afford. Hazel was their long-awaited child, born after 3 years of trying and 2 miscarriages that nearly broke them. Perhaps they did break them, but they just didn't realize it. Approximately 6 months before that fateful Tuesday, Nadine's behavior began to change. She stopped laughing at Dennis's paper sales jokes, started staying late at work, citing Dr. Morrison's extended hours. Her phone suddenly became password protected, and she took calls in the garage, explaining it was her sister having problems. Nadine began buying new, expensive clothes that seemed ill-suited for a hygienist. When Dennis inquired about a Victoria's Secret credit card charge, she retorted that she deserved to feel beautiful. Her words, implying Dennis had given up and she didn't have to follow suit, cut him deeper than he cared to admit. Dennis's brother, Garrett, noticed Nadine's changes before he did. Garrett owned Garrett's Auto Repair on the South Side, which he had transformed into a thriving business with 8 employees. Every Thursday after work, the brothers would meet for a beer. In recent months, Garrett had begun to speak about Nadine more quietly and cautiously. One evening, peeling the label off a Budweiser bottle, he asked Dennis if he was sure everything was all right at home, noting Nadine had changed lately. Dennis brushed off his concerns, attributing everything to work stress and the inevitable difficulties in any marriage. Garrett merely nodded, but Dennis caught the worry in his eyes. Garrett was 2 years Dennis's junior, but always possessed a wisdom and knack for understanding people, much like he understood cars with their hoods open. The fateful day that turned his world upside down began quite ordinarily. Dennis Holbrook awoke at 5:45 a.m. as always. He took an invigorating shower, trying not to wake Nadine, who only pretended to sleep, her uneven breathing betraying her. In the quiet kitchen, where only the gurgle of the coffee maker and the neighbor's dog's morning bark could be heard, he made coffee. Before leaving, Dennis gently touched his wife's cheek with his lips, but felt her turn away. He caught the faint scent of unfamiliar cologne. "Today is an important presentation," he told her back. "The Peterson Industries account. If it goes well, Vernon might deign to approve a promotion." In response, There was an inarticulate mumble that could have meant, "Good luck," or "I don't care." Dennis chose to hear the former. At the office, something immediately felt wrong. Conversation ceased the moment he appeared. His assistant Karen avoided eye contact, merely passing messages silently and quickly departing. Everyone was already assembled in the conference room. About 40 department employees stared at Vernon, who sat at the head of the table like an executioner checking the sharpness of his axe. Life often sends us signs portending coming storms, but we, engrossed in routine or blinded by pride, ignore them. Looking back, Dennis realized the cracks in his foundation had appeared long before this day, perhaps even years ago. But then, as usual, he pushed forward, head down. That's how people of his ilk operate. They work hard, provide for their families, endure. Midwest Paper Solutions wasn't just a workplace for Dennis. For 12 years, it had become an integral part of his identity. He began his career as a junior sales representative, cold calling potential clients and pitching them to switch paper suppliers. After 50 rejections a day, he would rejoice when someone managed to spare 5 minutes for a presentation. The company occupied 3 floors of a modern glass and concrete building downtown Columbus. The open-plan office was adorned with motivational posters urging synergy and excellence. Dennis knew every coffee stain on the 3rd-floor carpet, every elevator creak, every shortcut through the cubicle maze to avoid small talk with Peterson from accounting. His desk was in a corner of the 3rd floor, a premium spot with a partial view of the parking lot. He decorated it with photos capturing happy moments. Dennis and Nadine at Niagara Falls on their 10th anniversary, his daughter Hazel's graduation, where she delivered a moving farewell speech, and their last Christmas with his father, shortly before cancer took him. That photo was sometimes the hardest to look at. Dennis's father had worked 40 years in a steel mill, never missing a day. He retired on a Friday and died on Tuesday. "Don't be like me, Dennis," he'd said shortly before his death. "Don't let work become your entire life." But Dennis, without realizing it, was following in his father's footsteps, albeit in different shoes. The Peterson Industries account had been Dennis's obsession for the past 3 months. It was meant to be his triumph, an $8 million 5-year contract that would supply paper products to their entire Midwest distribution network. He had meticulously studied their operations, memorized their management structure, and even personally visited their Indiana facilities to understand their workflow. Vernon had personally assigned him this project, and in that rare moment, he had seemed almost human. "This is your chance to prove you're worthy of a spot in senior management, Holbrook," he'd said, twirling his golden pen between his fingers. "Don't let me down." Every morning for those 3 months, Dennis arrived at the office by 6:30 a.m. Karen, his loyal assistant, was already waiting with a freshly brewed cup of coffee, black with 1 sugar, and printed reports. She was 58 and had worked for the company longer than anyone except the founders. Karen knew all the business secrets and intricacies. "Mr. Holbrook, you're going to work yourself to death," she'd sometimes say with maternal concern in her voice. "When was the last time you had a proper lunch?" Dennis would wave her off, promising to catch up after the Peterson deal was closed. Nadine's changes were gradual, almost imperceptible. First, she suddenly decided to get a gym membership, even though their basement housed a perfectly functional treadmill. Then came a book club, with meetings every Wednesday evening, though she never seemed to finish a single book. Her phone became her constant companion, and she smiled at messages in a way she hadn't smiled at Dennis in years. When asked who she was texting, she'd reply, "Just the girls from work," and hastily leave the room. The dental clinic where she worked was only a 15-minute drive, but for some reason, she started returning home 2 hours later than usual. Dennis's brother, Garrett, tried to warn him during their traditional Thursday gatherings at Murphy's Tavern, in their favorite corner where the Budweiser neon sign flickered like a fading heartbeat. "She's changed, Dennis," he said, avoiding eye contact. "Remember how she used to come to the shop, bring us lunch when we were working on your car? She hasn't been here in 6 months. And at Hazel's birthday, she was on her phone the entire evening." Dennis tried to make excuses, telling him about the pressure at work, how Vernon had become even stricter. Garrett just shook his head, his hands still oily from a long day at the shop. "A woman doesn't buy new lingerie and hide receipts because of work stress, brother." "Hey, brother." The narrator's mother, Ruth, observed the goings-on from her room at Shady Oaks. Despite being 78 and her hands gnarled by arthritis, her mind remained sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. Every Sunday, her son visited her for lunch in the dining room, and she interrogated him like an experienced detective. "Is your wife still working late?" she'd ask, slowly stirring her soup. "Still wearing that suffocating perfume like a flower shop exploded?" His mother had never held warm feelings for Nadine, considering her too focused on appearance and prone to boasting about what others lacked. "A woman who keeps score in a marriage is playing to win, not to love," she'd declared at the rehearsal dinner. He should have listened to her. The morning ritual had transformed into an icy formality. Wake up, shower, dress in the closet, trying not to wake Nadine, though she was always awake, make coffee, check email, leave a perfunctory "have a good day" note that she likely threw away unread. The drive to work took 23 minutes on a good day and 35 on a bad one. He listened to talk radio, the voices filling the oppressive silence that would otherwise force him to ponder what his marriage had become. Sometimes he'd find himself driving on autopilot, arriving at the office with no memory of the journey, as if his body knew the way, but his mind wandered somewhere else. Vernon's behavior had undergone a dramatic change in recent weeks. Casual dismissiveness had escalated into overt hostility. He would interrupt Dennis's presentations, picking apart minor flaws, questioning his decisions in front of junior staff, and making sarcastic remarks about his conservative sales approach. At one meeting, he'd asked if Dennis needed reading glasses, implying he'd overlooked obvious errors in reports. There were no errors. Both knew it. The entire room knew it. But power doesn't have to be right. It just has to be power. The quarterly review meeting was scheduled for 2:00 p.m. on Tuesday, March 15th, a date now seared into his memory like a brand. He arrived 10 minutes early. The Peterson Industries presentation was already loaded onto the laptop, 43 slides containing market analysis, cost projections, and implementation strategies. 3 months of his life poured into them. The conference room was packed, the entire sales department, plus key personnel from operations and finance. Vernon presided at the head of the table in a charcoal suit that likely cost more than most attendees' monthly mortgage payments. His golden pen tapped against his palm, like a metronome counting down to an imminent catastrophe. "Have a seat, Holbrook," Vernon said, with a false warmth in his voice that portended swift destruction. A silence typical of situations where everyone smells blood fell over the room. About 40 pairs of eyes darted between Vernon and him like spectators in a gladiatorial arena. He placed his laptop bag on the table, noting his hands remained steady despite the knot forming in his stomach. Karen, the secretary, sat in the corner, taking minutes, and when their eyes met, she quickly looked away, but he caught a glimpse of sympathy in her gaze. "Dennis," Vernon began, raising his voice so everyone could hear, "we need to discuss your performance, inconsistencies in your reports, missed opportunities with existing clients, and a general decline in morale within your department under your leadership." Figures from the last quarter flashed in Dennis's mind. Growth was 18%. Client retention was at a record high. His team had just received a regional award for outstanding achievement. "Vernon, I don't understand what you're talking about. Our metrics are the highest they've been in 2 years. A predatory smile appeared on Vernon's face, like a cat toying with a mouse before devouring it. "Numbers aren't everything, Dennis. Leadership is more than spreadsheets. It's vision, innovation, the ability to inspire others to great things. Qualities, frankly, that you lack." Jerry Kaufman from accounting involuntarily gasped. Linda from HR shifted in her chair, her pen frozen above her notepad. The air conditioner hummed overhead, the only sound in a room full of bated breath. "Effective immediately, your employment with Midwest Paper Solutions is terminated," Vernon announced, enunciating each word clearly. "Security will escort you out after this meeting. Your final check will be mailed along with COBRA coverage information for your health insurance." The words crashed down on him like physical blows. 12 years, 60-hour work weeks, missed family dinners, postponed vacations, all reduced to a public execution for entertainment. However, Vernon wasn't done with the humiliating spectacle. He was merely setting the stage for the climax. With an affected casualness that sent a chill down Dennis's spine, he uttered, "Oh yes, almost forgot about Dennis. I have something else to tell you. In the spirit of absolute transparency, which we value so much at Midwest Paper Solutions, I feel it's my duty to inform you that Nadine and I are now together." A gasp rippled through the room. Faces of those present, like spectators at a tennis match, darted between Dennis and Vernon. Someone in the back rows awkwardly stifled a laugh but quickly quieted under the stern glances of colleagues. Vernon, meanwhile, seemed to bask in triumph. "She's already moved her things into my downtown penthouse. Our relationship has been going on for 3 months. Nadine felt you should hear about it from me personally, in a professional setting, rather than come home to an empty apartment in bewilderment." Dennis felt his feet rooted to the floor, yet somehow, incomprehensibly, he managed to stand. "You're lying," his own voice sounded, as if from a distance. "Am I?" Vernon countered, pulling out his phone and displaying a photo to the entire room. The picture showed Nadine in a new red dress, standing on a balcony that clearly belonged to Vernon, against a city skyline. His arm was around her waist, and both raised champagne glasses to the camera. The photo was time-stamped last Saturday, when Nadine claimed to be at her book club. "She's a wonderful woman," Vernon continued, putting his phone away. "And she deserves someone who can provide her with a decent life, not someone stuck in a mid-level job driving a 5-year-old Honda and living in a suburban house with a mortgage you can barely afford." These words, like poisoned arrows, struck at his heart, for there was a bitter truth in them. Yes, Dennis drove a 2019 Honda Accord because it was reliable and paid off. Yes, their home in Worthington was modest, but located in a good neighborhood with a good school for Hazel. These weren't failures, but well-considered decisions. But at that moment, under the cold, fluorescent lights, in the presence of 40 witnesses to his humiliation, they felt like a brand of shame burned into his chest. "Security is waiting outside," Vernon announced, pointing to the door where 2 guards stood ready to intervene. "Gather your things and leave. We have an important presentation that requires attention." Earl, an older guard with kind eyes and a gray mustache, approached Dennis first. "Come on, son," he said softly, placing a hand on his elbow. "I'll help you pack." The walk through the office was like a funeral procession. Conversation ceased as they passed. Some colleagues averted their gaze, while others, on the contrary, stared at Dennis with undisguised curiosity, and some even with sympathy. His desk was already cleared, personal items carelessly stacked in a cardboard box. On top lay a photo of Dennis and Nadine at Niagara Falls, her smiling face now seeming like a mocking grimace. "This isn't right. What they did," Earl whispered as they waited for the elevator. "I've been here 15 years, seen a lot, but never such savagery." His partner, a young man with an indifferent gaze and a badge reading Morrison, seemed to enjoy the scene. "Policy is policy," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Terminated employees shouldn't linger on company property. It's a security matter." The elevator descent felt endless. 3 floors of humiliation, each chime marking a new step in his fall. In the parking lot, the guards watched as Dennis loaded the box into the trunk of his Honda. The "best dad in the world" mug had shattered during packing, leaving coffee stains on family photos and sharp shards that cut Dennis as he tried to clean them up. "Don't come back," Morrison said as Dennis got into his car. "Your key card is deactivated and you're on the undesirable list. Any attempt to enter will be considered trespassing." Earl, seizing the moment, slipped Dennis a business card. "My nephew's a lawyer," he whispered. "Specializes in wrongful termination cases. What happened isn't just immoral, it might be illegal. Give him a call." Dennis drove home as if in a fog. His mind refused to process what had happened. Fired, publicly humiliated, betrayed by his wife. In just 10 minutes, his entire life had collapsed like a building demolished by an explosion, leaving behind only dust and debris. A cheerful pop song about love and happiness played on the radio, but Dennis turned it off, preferring the silence that matched the emptiness growing in his chest. The front door revealed a scene reminiscent of a crime. The apartment seemed untouched, yet an anxiety hung in the air, as if invisible fingerprints defiled every corner. Nadine's absence was palpable in every room. Open closet doors revealed empty hangers, swaying slightly from the air conditioner's breeze. The vanity in the bathroom gaped empty where her cosmetics once adorned it. She had taken the best towels, the luxurious anniversary bedding, and even the coffee maker given for Christmas. However, the wedding album remained untouched on the coffee table, open to a photo capturing the cake-cutting moment, with the imprint of her lipstick on his cheek. Laughter and joy flashed in his memory, but the details eluded him. His wedding ring rested on the kitchen counter, accompanied by a note on her personalized stationery. "This is for the best. Don't call. N." The brevity of the message was striking, as if 15 years of shared life were condensed into 11 words. The ring felt heavy in his hand, a simple gold band with 3 diamonds, for which he had saved for 6 long months. Memories of Nadine's trembling hand as he placed the ring on her finger at the altar now seemed ghostly, as if the life they had built had never existed. Dusk gathered in the living room, a glass of bourbon untouched in his hand. The silence pressed down, broken only by the steady ticking of an antique clock, Nadine's parents' wedding gift. It was 7:00 p.m., dinner time, 8:00 p.m., Netflix time. At 9:00 p.m., she usually showered, and he pretended to read, enjoying her off-key singing. At 10:00 p.m., they went to bed, sometimes together, sometimes not, but always under one roof, in one life, in one lie, as it now became clear. The phone was silent. Only 2 messages broke the quiet. His daughter Hazel asked about his well-being, mentioning a call from the office, and asked him to call back. Garrett expressed sympathy in his intention to visit Vernon. He had no strength to reply. How could he explain to his children that their father had been so blind he hadn't noticed his world crumbling? At 11:47 p.m., a call came from an unknown number. Almost automatically he answered, expecting an advertisement or a wrong number, but something compelled him to pick up. "Don't hang up," a gruff male voice said, authoritative and convincing. "You don't know me, but I know everything about you, Dennis Holbrook." Dennis's voice sounded calmer than he felt. "Who is this?" The stranger introduced himself. "Someone who knows Vernon Cray better than you think. He didn't just steal your wife, Dennis. Listen carefully. This will change everything." Dennis straightened up, forgetting the bourbon. "I'm listening." The voice introduced himself as Malcolm Shores, a private investigator, a former FBI forensic accountant. He explained that Vernon's first wife had hired him during their divorce 5 years ago, suspecting hidden assets. But what he found was far more serious. The mention of Vernon's first wife stirred vague memories of a scandalous divorce, presented by Vernon as the result of his ex-wife's greed and mental instability. Everyone believed him, as they usually believe the boss. Malcolm continued, "Your wife is victim number 4. Vernon has a pattern. He targets married women whose husbands work for him, seduces them, destroys the husbands' careers, and then discards them when he gets bored. 3 to 6 months is his usual time frame. Your wife has about 3 weeks left before he moves on to someone younger and more interesting." Dennis replied bitterly, "That's no longer my problem." Malcolm let out a sharp laugh. "No, but it could become her problem. Vernon has been embezzling money from Midwest Paper Solutions, $2 million over 4 years, funneling it through fictitious accounts, shell companies, a kind of paper trail you as a paper sales specialist should understand." Details of the Peterson Industries proposal, supplier reports he had recently reviewed, and the very inconsistencies he had noticed but not fully investigated immediately flashed through Dennis's mind. "The Hartley Foods account," he blurted out. "There were supplier payments that didn't match any delivery schedule." "Exactly," Malcolm confirmed. "You were getting too close to the truth. The Peterson audit would inevitably have required a full audit of all supplier relationships. Vernon couldn't afford that risk. So he got rid of you before you could expose him." "Why should I believe you?" Dennis asked skeptically. "Because in about 10 hours your corporate email access will be revoked. That's standard procedure, activated 24 hours after termination. But you still have access now. Log in, download everything from the Hartley Foods folder, the Brennan Industries files, and anything related to a company called Sigma Paper Wholesale. It's a shell corporation, existing only in Vernon's imagination and his Cayman Islands bank account." "And then what?" Dennis inquired. "Tomorrow morning, we'll meet at the Riverside Diner on Route 40, exactly at 7 a.m. I'll have documents you need to see, and you'll have the evidence the FBI needs to finally nail Vernon Cray. The FBI has been working this case for 1.5 years. The Economic Crimes Unit is working closely with the IRS. They needed an insider, someone with access to information, but not part of Vernon's inner circle. Your firing was the breakthrough they'd been waiting for. You're clean, Dennis. Your reputation is unblemished, making you the perfect witness. Why are you helping me? Dennis asked, already retrieving his laptop and entering corporate credentials. There was a slight pause, and Malcolm spoke again, a weight of old pain in his voice. Vernon destroyed my brother in the exact same way 5 years ago. Took his wife, his job, his reputation. 6 months later, my brother killed himself, a bullet to the head. His suicide note said he couldn't live with the shame. Vernon Cray has ruined enough lives. It's time to stop him. The email system granted Dennis access. His credentials were still valid. There they were, all the folders Malcolm had mentioned. He began downloading the files, watching the progress bar fill the screen, while Malcolm gave additional instructions. Don't try to contact your wife. Don't confront Vernon. Don't tell anyone what's happening except your lawyer. Vernon has eyes everywhere, but he's also arrogant. He thinks you're broken, defeated, and probably drinking yourself into a stupor in your empty house right now. Let him think that. What about Nadine? Dennis asked. She made her choice. But Dennis, there's something else you should know. We have evidence she was planning to divorce you anyway. Vernon just expedited the process. She's been transferring money from your joint accounts for months. Small amounts you probably didn't notice. Check your statements. She was going to bleed you dry and leave, regardless of the circumstances. Vernon just offered her a better deal. Dennis opened his banking app on his phone as the files continued to download. And there they were. Transfers he'd never noticed. $50 here, $100 there, always to her personal account. Always just under the amount that would grab his attention. $3,000 over 6 months. Death by 1,000 cuts. The FBI agent leading this case is Patricia Vance, Malcolm continued. She'll be at the diner tomorrow too. Bring everything you download tonight. Make copies. Save them in multiple places. And Dennis, one more thing. What? Your brother Garrett and your daughter Hazel. They're good people. They'll want to help. Let them. You'll need support for what's ahead. Vernon Cray doesn't go down easily, but when he falls, he drags everyone connected to him down with him. Your wife chose the wrong side. Make sure you choose the right one. The file download completed at 0:23 a.m. 67 files, 8 GB of evidence, 4 years of Vernon's criminal activity documented in spreadsheets and email correspondence. Dennis copied them to 3 flash drives, uploaded copies to a secure cloud server, and even sent them to an old Gmail address he hadn't used in years. After years of silence, the phone rang, pulling me from my routine. "See you at 7, I told Malcolm. "Dennis," I heard in response, "you were a victim. Tomorrow you'll be a weapon. Vernon Cray will answer for his misdeeds, and you'll be the instrument of justice. Good night." It's Vernon's last peaceful night. The Riverside Diner, perched by Route 40 like a relic of a bygone era, beckoned with its chrome gleam and neon lights. Red vinyl booths and strong coffee, capable of dissolving anything, created a unique atmosphere. I arrived at 6:45 a.m., exhausted from sleeplessness, with 3 flash drives hidden in different pockets, as if guarding nuclear secrets. Malcolm Shores, a man with a short gray haircut and eyes that had seen too much, was already waiting in the far booth, which offered a good view of both exits. Across from him sat a woman in a sharp blue suit, undoubtedly an FBI agent. "Dennis Holbrook," Malcolm introduced me as I slid into the booth. "Meet Special Agent Patricia Vance. She's been looking forward to meeting you." Agent Vance shook my hand firmly and dryly, conveying a businesslike demeanor. Her gaze assessed me, weighing my potential as a valuable witness. "Mr. Holbrook, the information you're about to receive may shock you. But first, did you bring the files?" I handed her one of the flash drives. She plugged it into her laptop and her fingers flew across the keyboard. A professional interest, replaced by predatory satisfaction, flickered across Agent Vance's face. "Sigma Paper Wholesale Accounts. We've been chasing these for 6 months. Mr. Holbrook, you've just given us the missing link." Malcolm slid a thick manila folder towards me. "Open it." Inside were photographs that sent a chill down my spine. Vernon with different women, and all the stories followed the same script. Wives of a warehouse manager, a sales director, a systems analyst. The husbands would suddenly lose their jobs, and the women would be discarded a few months later. Bank statements confirmed payments to the women. Apartment leases registered in Vernon's name, even receipts from the same jewelry store for identical diamond necklaces. He's a true predator, Agent Vance stated, but that's only one side of the coin. The financial manipulations are what will send him to prison. She pulled out another folder marked FBI Confidential. $2.3 million embezzled over 4 years. Fictitious suppliers, inflated invoices, kickbacks. Your files confirm our suspicions, which we couldn't prove. Vernon personally authorized every payment. But the most painful part is yet to come, Malcolm said in a quiet voice. Your wife wasn't just cheating on you. She actively helped Vernon gain access to your personal financial information. We have emails, Dennis. She sent him your bank statements, information about your retirement account, even data about your daughter's college fund. Agent Vance handed me a printout of the correspondence. Nadine's personal email address. Messages to Vernon, discussions about my bonus system, accrued vacation time, our share of the house. She helped him assess your value, Vance explained. Vernon promised her half of what he could get from you in a divorce, plus what he was skimming from the company. She dreamed of becoming a millionaire, but she became an accomplice to federal crimes. The coffee in my cup turned to poison. She was going to rob me? Worse, Malcolm replied. She was going to claim abuse, frame you as unstable, aggressive. Vernon had pulled this before with others. To paint the husband as dangerous, get a restraining order, take everything, playing the victim. Your firing was meant to provoke your nervous breakdown. We need your help, Agent Vance said, leaning forward. We have enough evidence to arrest Vernon, but we want more. We want him to confess to everything, so his guilt is beyond doubt. Are you willing to wear a wire? Doubt swirled in Dennis's mind as the direct question was posed. Are you willing to wear a wire? A brief answer followed. When? He was told that last night, at 3 o'clock, he had received a call from Vernon, who had left a voicemail. Dennis immediately pulled out his phone and played the recording on speaker. Vernon's voice, with noticeable signs of intoxication, said, Dennis, it's Vernon. I'm truly sorry things turned out this way. As man to man, we need to discuss the situation. I suggest we meet tomorrow evening at Carmine's at 8 o'clock. We'll talk about your severance package. Perhaps we can find a solution that works for everyone. Malcolm promptly noted, he'll try to buy your silence. Agent Vance added, he'll likely offer you 6 months' salary in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement. You'll have to promise not to disclose information about the company or the circumstances of your termination. Plus, he's arrogant enough to start boasting. Get him to talk about Nadine, about the other women, about how smart he thinks he is. We'll be conducting surveillance from a van outside. Once he talks, we'll move in. That evening, Dennis headed to Carmine's, a well-known Italian restaurant where Vernon felt like a mafia don controlling his territory. Vernon had reserved a private room in the back, away from prying eyes. He was already there, dressed in his immutable charcoal suit, a golden pen resting beside a glass of whiskey. Dennis felt the microphone wire burning his skin, though Agent Vance had assured him it was completely imperceptible. Dennis! Vernon exclaimed, rising and extending his hand like an old friend. Thanks for coming. Have a seat. Have a drink. They serve excellent 20-year scotch here. Dennis took his seat, ordered a beer he had no intention of drinking, and prepared to wait. Vernon wasted no time. Listen, yesterday was a tough day, he began, a false concern in his voice. But you have to understand, business is business. Nadine came to me, not the other way around. She was unhappy. Dennis, you grew distant. You were married to your job. The passion died. Can you blame her for wanting more? What about the others? Dennis asked, recalling Agent Vance's instructions. I heard there were other women before Nadine. Vernon laughed, swirling his whiskey glass. You've done your homework. Yes, there were others. Martha, Jennifer, Patricia. They were all desperate housewives yearning for adventure. Their husbands were weak. Dennis, like you, no offense, but men like you are predictable. You work hard, follow the rules, never take risks. Women get bored with that. It must be expensive to keep them happy, Dennis remarked, trying to maintain an impassive demeanor. That's the most beautiful part. Vernon leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I don't spend my own money. The company has so many revenue streams. Who notices a few thousand here and there? Sigma paper. Wholesale alone brings me 40 grand a month. Shell company, but real profit. I invoice Midwest paper. They pay Sigma. Sigma's account is in the Cayman Islands, under my control. That's fraud, Dennis exclaimed. It's business, Vernon corrected. Everyone steals. Board members, the CEO, everyone has their schemes. Mine is just more elegant. 4 years, Dennis, 4 years. And no one noticed until you started digging into the Peterson account. You got too close to the Sigma accounts. I couldn't allow it, so I destroyed your life. I did you a favor, Vernon declared, his arrogance reaching its peak. Nadine was leaving anyway. I have texts where she calls you pathetic, says she hated watching you eat dinner. She couldn't stand another night in that suburban prison. At least now you can blame me instead of facing the truth. She just fell out of love with you. And with the others, with their wives, it's the same story. Unhappy women, boring husbands, predictable ending. Husbands always blame me, but they never blame themselves. It's easier that way. Here's what I'm offering, Dennis. $50,000 is a severance package. Let's call it a consulting fee. You sign a non-disclosure agreement. You agree not to discuss anything about Midwest paper or the circumstances of your termination. And you certainly don't mention Sigma or any other supplier accounts. Take the money, start over. Maybe find a woman who actually wants to be with you this time. Make no mistake, this time she'll really want you. Before an answer could be given, the door burst open and Federal Bureau of Investigation agents stormed into the room. Their weapons were drawn, and their badges reflected the subdued restaurant light. The whiskey glass Vernon held shattered with a crash as he sprang from his chair. A gamut of emotions crossed his face. First confusion, then rage, and finally a terrifying realization. "Vernon Cray," Agent Vance proclaimed, her voice imbued with the unwavering power of federal authority. "You are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent." Vernon glanced at me, then his eyes fell on the listening device, now visible beneath my hiked-up shirt. His face contorted with uncontrollable fury, taking on an almost animalistic expression. "You set me up, you pathetic traitor. You set me up." "Actually, Vernon," I replied, rising from my chair as handcuffs were placed on his wrists, "you set yourself up. I just held the door open while you walked through." As he was being led out of the restaurant, Vernon made a desperate attempt at manipulation. Nadine was in on it. She knew about the money, helped plan everything. If I go to jail, she should too. "We're aware of that," Agent Vance replied succinctly. "She's also being arrested as we speak." The last thing Vernon Cray saw was being roughly shoved into an FBI sedan. His expensive $3,000 suit was hopelessly crumpled, and his golden pen lay on the table beside the shards of the broken glass. His empire, built on deceit and manipulation, was crumbling before his eyes. The king was fallen, and he had dragged his queen down with him. 6 months later, I stood in what was once Vernon Cray's imposing office, now mine. Outside, October rain poured, blurring the outlines of downtown Columbus. On the mahogany desk where he once tapped his golden pen, there were now photos of my daughter Hazel during university orientation week, my brother Garrett at the grand opening of his expanded auto repair shop, and my mother Ruth, surrounded by loving grandchildren at her 80th birthday celebration. The office had a completely different atmosphere, as if evil spirits had been banished from the house. Vernon received a harsh sentence, 15 years in federal prison without parole. The judge described his crimes as a systemic abuse of trust that had destroyed numerous lives for greed and exorbitant ego. The investigation uncovered a total of $4 million hidden in 6 different offshore accounts, as well as 3 properties purchased through proxies. All proceeds were confiscated and assets frozen. In an instant, he moved from a luxurious penthouse to a bleak prison cell. Nadine was sentenced to 5 years in prison for conspiracy to commit fraud, plus 2 years suspended. Her lawyer tried to portray her as another victim of Vernon's manipulation, but the incriminating emails shattered that defense. There, in black and white, were her plans to drain our accounts, fabricate false abuse accusations, and destroy my relationship with Hazel. The woman I had loved for 15 years had become a stranger. Or perhaps she had always been that way, and I had simply been too blind to see it. She sent letters from prison, long and rambling apologies that my lawyer strongly advised me not to read. I followed his advice, Some words simply don't deserve to be heard. The company's board of directors personally apologized to me. The chairman, Robert Fitzgerald, flew in specifically from New York to offer me Vernon's position. "We failed you, Dennis," he said, sitting in my living room and looking genuinely ashamed. "We allowed a cancer to grow in our organization. We need someone of impeccable integrity to cut it out and repair the damage. That person is you." The offered salary was 3 times my previous one. The bonus structure was extremely generous, but the most satisfying part was the feeling of respect, the realization that 40 people who had once witnessed my humiliation now reported to me. And not one of them could meet my eyes for the first month. I didn't fire anyone who had laughed on that fateful day. I wasn't seeking revenge. I simply did my job well, and that was enough to satisfy my need for justice. Revenge proved enough to turn life around. My daughter, Hazel, became a steadfast support. The night of the arrest, she rushed from Ohio State University and, finding her father in the dark living room, simply hugged him. "Dad, Mom showed her true colors, and you showed yours. You stood tall, keeping your honor. That's what matters most," she said, her words full of uncommon wisdom. She spent the entire summer by his side, helping to transform the house, to exorcise Nadine's spirit from it, to breathe new life into it. The walls were repainted, the furniture replaced, creating an atmosphere where one could breathe freely again. Garrett's support remained unwavering. The day after Dennis's firing, he offered him a job at his shop, ready to entrust him with the cash register, to teach him oil changes, anything to help him stay busy and pay the bills. "You're my brother, and that means something," he simply said. When Dennis got Vernon's position, Garrett invited him for a beer, cautioning him, "Don't become like him, Dennis. Don't let that office break you." Dennis promised and kept his word. Every Thursday, they still meet at Murphy's Tavern, the same booth, the same beer, the same unbreakable brotherhood. His mother, Ruth, reacted best to the news. Hearing about Vernon's arrest, she smiled and said, "I always said that man had snake eyes, but you, my son, have the eyes of a survivor. Your father would be proud of you." And she was right about his father. He often repeated, "A man's true character is revealed not in prosperity, but in adversity." "Anyone can swim in calm waters," he used to say, "but a storm shows who the real sailor is." The Peterson Industries deal, where it all began, was closed 2 months after Dennis took over Vernon's position. $8 million over 5 years, the largest contract in the company's history. Dennis insisted that Karen, his former assistant and now office manager, be present at the signing. She had supported him through the toughest times and deserved to share in the triumph. Malcolm Shores became an unexpected friend. They meet for coffee once a month. 2 men, broken by Vernon Cray's cruelty, but not shattered. Malcolm spoke of his brother, showed photos of the man Vernon had destroyed 5 years ago. "You survived where he perished," Malcolm said one morning. "That's more than survival, that's victory." He attended the trial, watched Vernon's sentencing, and that's when Dennis first saw him shed tears. Justice had been served, albeit belatedly. Agent Patricia Vance sent a letter after the trial. "Mr. Holbrook, in 20 years of investigating economic crimes, I have rarely met a person who endured such pressure with such dignity. Your testimony was important, but your dignity was inspiring. Vernon Cray ruined many lives. You were the one who stopped him. Don't forget that." 5 words, spoken by Malcolm on the phone that night, changed everything. Good people deserve second chances. But Dennis realized it wasn't just words. Good people create their own second chances. They take the wreckage of their lives and build something better, stronger, more real. They don't let the Vernon Crays of this world win. Dennis still lives in the same house in Worthington, still drives a Honda, albeit a newer model. Sometimes at night, he stands in the kitchen where Nadine left the wedding ring and wonders how much everything changed in such a short time. The man who stood there 6 months ago, broken and humiliated, seems like a stranger. Or perhaps he was always a stranger, and the real Dennis was waiting for his moment, until the worst day of his life set him free from the burden of circumstances. Last week, Dennis hired a new sales manager, a young woman named Jessica, whose husband works in accounting. Vernon would have seen them as potential victims. Dennis sees them as good people deserving a chance to build their lives without predators lurking in offices. That's the difference between Vernon's legacy and his own. One destroyed, the other rebuilds. Dennis Holbrook reflects on his experiences, and there is no hint of bitterness in his words. On the contrary, he feels a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude that the truth came to light, freeing him from years of living a lie with Nadine. Gratitude for the opportunity to set an example of resilience and integrity for his daughter. Gratitude to his brother for his unconditional faith and support. And even gratitude to Vernon for his excessive hubris, which ultimately led to the exposure of his crimes. The company, having weathered the upheaval, emerged stronger. The toxic atmosphere created by Vernon is a thing of the past, giving way to a healthy work environment. Employees are no longer afraid to speak their minds, knowing that corruption will not go unpunished. They witnessed the fall of the powerful and were convinced that justice can, after all, prevail. A recent phone call from an unknown number caused a fleeting moment of anxiety, reminiscent of Malcolm's unsettling call. But it turned out to be just a mistake. Someone had dialed the wrong number for a pizza place. Dennis smiled, gave them the correct number, and hung up, realizing that a random call no longer caused him pain. This is healing, when the terrible events of the past become simply a part of life lived. Vernon, who believed he would destroy Dennis that fateful day in the conference room, actually liberated him. Liberated him from a dishonest marriage, from working under a corrupt boss, from the gray and dull life that he had once considered sufficient. Sometimes destruction is merely disguised repair, and losing everything is the only way to understand what truly holds value. The phrase, "good people deserve second chances," became Dennis's guiding star. But he realized that second chances are not simply given. They must be earned, fought for, built from the ashes of the first attempt. And once given that chance, one must make the most of it. Dennis Holbrook was publicly humiliated, fired, and betrayed. His boss took his wife and dignity in front of many witnesses, and this, paradoxically, was the best thing that ever happened to him. Because hitting rock bottom is not the end of the road, but the beginning of a new, authentic story.